Thanks so much for that intro. Oh, I seem to be getting a little bit of background feed on that. So as Rick says, I do work for a company called the Value Builder System. I work with a ton of professional advisors that are looking to really grow their practices and work with more business owners. My role in itself is actually as the director of sales and business development. So I talk about messaging a lot. We're constantly getting in front of new groups. And so this whole concept of the hero's journey, it continues to evolve for me personally. And I continue to learn more things and kind of think things through in a different way. But it's been one of the most kind of transformative things for my own sales skills, for my own presentation skills. As Rick knows, and he's heard me speak, I do public speaking as well. And so I really wanted to kind of share this concept with you and kind of build a little bit of a story along the way as to why I think this is going to be something super powerful from everything that you do. Straight into talking on a podcast or writing a message for a social media blog, anything like that. Okay. And I thought I'd start off by kind of throwing this age-old thing. I think we've all heard about this, or maybe said it ourselves, this concept that facts tell and stories sell. And so I thought I'd start with a little bit of an experience of when I owned my own business. I used to be a franchise consultant, and I went on to open my own franchise. So I've gone and trained all of these franchises, prescription eyewear business across Southern Ontario. So I'd helped everybody figure out the marketing plans. I'd helped everybody figure out how to scale up. And I was the first one to open in downtown Toronto. And so, I'd go and do the corporate thing, and we have our postcard mailers. So yes, I'm aging myself on what my marketing skills used to be like. And we mail them out to our 5-kilometer radius, the people most likely, of course, to buy from me. And it fails. It was an epic disaster. I couldn't figure out why it was so bad until I stopped and looked at the messaging that we had. On the front page was a picture of a lady that was the soccer mom, worked perfectly for all our suburb locations, and it talked about how you could get your 3 pairs of glasses for the price of 1. Great savings. But that was the wrong message. It was the wrong story to tell. So what we did is we went and swapped out. I put in the young professional, knowing that 76% of my 5-kilometer radius, yes, I'm Canadian, you can hear the kilometers in it, was actually single professionals in ages 25 to 30. And so we have kind of told a different tale. And the tale really kind of went into about how you can have more options, you can match your outfits, it's all reasonable for you to do. You've been getting ripped off by all the high-end people out there. And it was very genuine, and it was a wild success. In fact, at the end of kind of me selling that business, we had an 80% retention rate and a 70% referral rate to new customers. So just telling our story constantly really built out. So that's the first story I thought I'd share, that I've kind of messed up on the storytelling. I've learned a lot along the way. But when we say this concept of facts tell, stories sell, a lot of times we fail on actually telling stories. And the reason is because we're telling the wrong stories. When you go and take a look at some of the data, Leadership IQ did this whole big thing where they kind of surveyed 180,000 people. Half of them turned around and said that they actually prefer more analytical selling, more analytical stories or marketing. They don't really respond to stories. And so it really challenges this concept of, well, do we focus on facts and stories? And so today you're going to kind of hear me talk, it's actually both. So why are stories really powerful? I'm going to take you a little bit into neuroscience, so we'll nerd out together for a second on this one here and talk a little bit about why stories are so compelling, what goes on in our brain. The human brain is actually wired for stories. As we begin listening to someone tell a story, something amazing happens. Our brain waves actually begin to move up and down for the same pattern and blood flow as that of our speaker. So it is hitting the same regions, and in fact, you end up being in sync together. Scientists or neuroscientists call this neural environment. So this is this brainwave sync. And so when I was thinking about what we should talk about today, I actually had come down and, Rick had given me a little bit of a background as to what you guys are all about. And this kind of sat down in my office, super quiet, 6 a.m., only quiet time in my entire house. And so I go and pour myself a cup of coffee and put my milk in it. And, it's freezing cold because it's here in Canada. So I'm watching the steam rise from my cup and really trying to think through what it is that we should talk about. What you notice actually that I just did from that little bit of a story is I synced our brains. A really quick way to create connection is actually to use the senses. So what you just heard me talk about, the quiet in the house, you couldn't hear anything, actually pouring a cup of coffee, they all sound like simple things, but if you slide in stuff about senses, right away you start to create a more powerful story. The thing is that great stories do tap into emotion for people, and that's why you hear that expression, people buy with emotion, justify with logic. And you need to figure out how you're going to combine that together in order to tell a really great story. When you paint a picture that actually describes the senses, so let's go back to that concept, the listener brains activates as if they were actually smelling coffee in that example. It's something that's happening that you don't even realize that's happening. So the reason that I would bring up coffee, for instance, would be that I was trying to create a feeling of you guys feeling awake, right? I'm about to tell you a big, long presentation. I'm going to throw out a bunch of data at you. I want you guys to feel awake. So if you start thinking about what different things you feel about stuff that you do, you'll be able to kind of create that connection with your audience. Seems like a really simple thing. But the whole point of all of this is that we really want our stories to be strategic. I'm not going to go up in front of an audience of 150 people and start talking about a cup of coffee. I probably isn't going to quite resonate the way that I want it to. But if I need to kind of trigger that emotion, and I was talking about my feelings, for instance, on selling my business and sitting up at 3 a.m., scouring through accounting papers, I'm trying to create an emotion within people. Okay. But there's a little bit more to it. There's 1,000 models that you guys could go grab and kind of research in terms of how the brain works and how people process information. But it really comes down to whether you're using DISC or Colby. This here happens to be Harriman's whole brain theory. It's the only nerd part, I promise, guys. The whole point is that people have preferences for the way that they absorb or get attracted to information. So you have kind of your top left-hand corner. These are very logical, fact-based people. They really just want the data, the numbers, the quantitative pieces. If we move down into this green quadrant, you're looking at people that really want to understand the whole process, what you're talking about. So if you're going to sell a product, they want to understand what do I pay up front? How long does it take for me to get that product? They want to kind of see the whole story all the way along. They don't want to just hear, great, I'll call you in 7 days. That's not going to be something that's going to resonate with them if we were talking about from that perspective. In our top kind of orange quadrant here, you have this holistic people, right? So these are the people that really resonate with emotional appeal in the sense of creating relationships with people. And then in the bottom quadrant, you have people that are very feelings-based. These are literally people that will buy from you because you compelled them with a story. The reason that I'm mentioning this is what I often find when people pull together their hero's journey is that they neglect to incorporate all 4 pieces. So they haven't told the story all the way along. They didn't go through and add in any data. They just focused on emotional appeal. That's not going to hit a wide audience. And so this kind of brings me back to what Rick had said you guys have been working on, is working through and, figuring out how you're going to talk on podcasts. And, maybe if you're being interviewed on something, you're going to have to appeal to a wide range of thinkers. Okay. So there's our background. That's the first piece. The second piece, and this one actually came out of a conversation that one of our advisors came to me and they said, listen, Laura, I've been trying to figure out Value Builder for a while. I'm doing the workshops, I'm doing the webinars, I'm following. It's really important to understand in relation to actually creating a great hero's journey, where people are in their buyer's journey. So let's think through the concept of the buyer's journey, right? First piece that you get is, of course, that this logic is going to lack that emotional appeal, right? Oftentimes we're kind of thinking through, and this is, again, this little kid about to jump off the cliff with his rocket jetpack on it. This really reminds me in my head of the business owners that I tend to talk to. We think of business owners themselves as risk takers and dreamers, and they're going out and kind of taking this huge jump off of a cliff. And so advisors sometimes come in that I talk to, and they think that they're coming at the beginning of the story. They're going to be able to help them right from the beginning. The reality is that this kid standing here has probably broken the wing off of his little rocket pack and fallen down the hill about 3 or 4 times. And so you can't really control where you're coming in somebody's buyer's journey. You just have to know that they really want to kind of be able to identify with you as to what their next step is based on where they are. So they need to hear, okay, you've fallen over, don't worry. I've had clients that have fallen too. and here's a story about what happened. That's what's going to appeal to them. You can't come in and start from the beginning and say you're about to jump off, you know, and start on this new adventure. That's not going to resonate with everyone. You have to tell the whole story. Okay. So when we talk about the buyer's journey, I've broken it into really 3 common stages. Again, lots of literature for you guys to go look at, but it really breaks it down into this concept of awareness, consideration, and decision. And how you market, or the types of things that are going to appeal to people at different stages, is actually going to be based on what stage they're in. So the awareness, of course, is they may not have any idea that they have a problem, right? So if you're selling a product, you know, a great example is we just got a new sales enablement tool. I thought that I was working quite great in using Salesforce, and we had built in some sequences. You know, why do I need this tool? And so somebody actually explained to us why a lot of sales teams are actually not performing at peak performance. And so they walked me through the story. They gave me the reason to understand that I actually had a problem and I really needed their solution. So again, not quite there. You really need to help them understand where they're sitting in the story. The things that are going to actually help them identify that pain and problem. So this would be things like any analytics, any data behind, you know, 76% of people prefer Crest over, you know, whatever. That's, again, example. Expert testimonials, white papers, so things that are very educational about what it is that you do, okay? That's going to help drive that awareness. Then you have people that come into this consideration stage, right? So they've kind of said, all right, maybe I got a problem here, but do I really need to solve this problem? Is it that big of a problem? They're kind of waffling. What's the solution? Let's look at all the different solutions. So again, the great part of where you're coming in here is podcasts, right? So these are people that are going to naturally want to come on because they already kind of know that they might want to figure out, in this case, for instance, all you guys here, how to be more effective when they are trying to figure out how to deliver or how to be on podcasts or how to host a podcast. You're going to want to look at things like webinars. Again, very educational. You get to actually go through the whole process of solutions, and things like workshops or how-to guides. Those would be the types of things that would really appeal to somebody in the consideration stage. And then your final stage is the decision, right? They know what the solution is. They've actually kind of figured out that the problem's worth solving. They've narrowed it down, and now they're trying to decide whether they're going to buy your product, or if you guys are service-based, your services, and what do they need in order to make that decision. This is where anything like benchmarking or comparing your solution to another person, different case studies, or more detailed product info is going to come in. Okay, but you have to be able to tell them the story and get them all the way to wanting to learn more about your specific product. So this is really, really important because you need your hero's journey if you were to go out and speak to large audiences, or if you're going to put out a mass marketing message to appeal to all 3 stages. Okay. So let's talk about the hero's journey. I'm sure that you guys are all kind of familiar with the hero's journey. It's really, really straightforward. It's actually kind of been created by a guy named Joseph Campbell way back in 1949. He was a scholar that outlined the 3 stages of this journey. So when you're using your hero's journey structure, you're creating a powerful connection and trust. You're creating this common ground between you and your listener. It's a structure that we should all be very familiar with because it's basically the plot of every single movie and story that you've ever read. I like to use the example of Star Wars because I think most people that may be on here have at least kind of watched Star Wars. So again, at the beginning of it, we know that Luke begins his venture in the normal world. He's this farmer, right? Starting to feel a little restless with his life, yearning for this adventure. And so he meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. His home gets burnt down. His family dies. This is where he's kind of crossing the threshold. He learns how to use the Force, and then he has to use these new skills to face the dark side. You get over here, right? Going through the death and rebirth, he learns the truth about his parents. He finally changes. He learns not to go to the dark side, and he becomes part of a new family and community, which creates this new normal world over here, and it's the beginning of the next adventure. Okay, so that's kind of how you walk around and tell that whole story together. Now, the hero is going to be you. This is really, really important. If you just focus on emotional connection, though, you'll have absolutely no action. So you really need to make sure that the story that you're telling drives the person towards taking the next step. in other words, to kind of compare to the last piece, we really want you to kind of be Yoda. You want your audience to experience the story as the hero. You want them to feel the pain and loss and victory with your hero. So this can be you. This can also be somebody that you know. So the hero's journey is really great at helping you create that emotional appeal. It's great at creating that relatable experience for our customers, but it does little to illustrate the logic of their buying decision. So without addressing the crucial questions that your audience has before making a purchase, you'll actually just inspire good feelings, but no action, okay? So let's walk through the importance of your hero's journey. What do we need to do here? The hero's journey is going to be really, really powerful because it's going to kind of show how you overcame the struggle, or somebody that you work with overcame the struggle that your potential clients might face. It's going to guide the conversation. So it's going to really help you identify that problem in that awareness stage that your clients need to solve. Really, really important about this as well, though, is that vulnerability inspires vulnerability. This is absolutely key when you're speaking to people. Oftentimes, how many of you guys, do you mind me just maybe asking really quickly, how many of you guys work in more of a service-based model? You're selling a service versus a specific product. Okay, awesome. So this is why this is really important. When we're selling something that's a service, you're needing to kind of not have something so tangible to be able to sell. So this common connection becomes really important. Unfortunately, let's take the example of our lovely Rick. So Rick obviously works with a lot of business owners. He gets a chance to talk to a lot of business owners. I think he's done a fantastic job with a lot of the activities that he does. But if Rick kind of came up and told this great story and he didn't highlight any of the issues or any of the struggles of a potential client or himself, what happens is that the person on the other side actually is pretty closed off. They're not going to think about that they may have a problem. They're not going to open up their mind and actually be willing to look into that. And so by getting up on stage, or on a podcast, or if you're doing a webinar, and just giving a little bit of that vulnerability, what you're really going to find is that the person on the other side starts to be more vulnerable in their mind as well. Most important part, though, when you're telling your hero's journey, you have to get somewhere to the triumph, right? So please make sure that if the story does not end well, you're going to have to make it end well. You can bend the truth a little bit on it, because at the end of the day, triumph gives hope. So if somebody is sitting in the audience, you've gotten them to the awareness stage, they're freaking out now in their head, you're moving them into the solution, the potential solution that you have, and then of course the decision that you're fantastic because you're showcasing how you've helped them. You really do need to make sure that you're going to go through and end the story with this great, and then they did this. Here's the triumph. Here's the other side of that. The great part that it also does, though, is that you can actually build instant credibility. You can add in some facts and data. You can really position yourself as an expert on it. But the story that you use gives you credibility. People are going to trust you if they know that you've walked the path that you're taking them on, or you've walked the path as a client that you're, already. You can kind of share a little bit about that. Crucial piece of your hero's journey story. They don't need the whole story either. They just need one version, and that version needs to be the heroic version. So let's kind of start with this concept of the strategy, okay? So starting with the strategy, let's go back one stage. You're really going to want to actually reverse engineer what information you're going to share. This is going to help you get to your desired impact. So to do that, we need to know what that desired impact is first. So let's give an example of some of the things that I would do, right? If you guys ever get, Rick's had a chance to sit on many of my webinars. My desired action is often, because I'm in sales, is to get people to raise their hand to a call. So I'll say, if you're interested in learning more about our Smart Start program, write SMART. That's the desired impact. But I've walked them through all the validation as to why they want to be interested in the Smart Start program. So there's the kind of story at the end. I'm going to suggest that you kind of, as you're starting to do this, there's going to be a nice little worksheet for you guys to use afterwards, that you start with one strategy. So if you want to do podcasts, Rick has it right in front of him printed, then focus on, okay, I'm going to be doing this specific podcast, and here's what I want to be. If you want to break it smaller, maybe it's a blog post, and this is what I want the action to be, okay? You want to think about the various situations in which you're going to be sharing information. So networking events? Are you going to have one-on-one client meetings, speaking engagements, interviews? All of those things are quite relevant. Again, so this is going to help you even in your sales conversations. And for different situations, you will want a different impact, okay? So let's do the example of this. If you were to be interviewed on a podcast, your desired action, and let's take again Rick, because I know his business so well, might be that he wants his listener to go to his website to get the Value Builder score. But if he was in a one-on-one sales meeting with somebody, with a potential client, his desired action might be to get them to sign up for his services, right? Like, listen, I can help you figure out all these things in your business. The hero's journey you share will have two different elements in those situations. So especially because the audience is different. So with an individual client, you can share a lot more. So you can be much more open. You can be a little bit more responsible because you'll know their situation. And so your strategic story is likely to be a little bit more crafted and designed to tap into that common ground. But a podcast, your story is likely just designed to help seed how they're getting their Value Builder score, which I do think is fantastic, not to tout what Rick does here, had alerted you to some red flags in your business that you've never seen before, and you're glad you did it because going through the questionnaire saved you $300,000 by improving on A, B, and C. That would be the example of the story that you would tell. And I'm happy to work through with anybody afterwards. Okay, so again, let's walk a little bit around what I've told you so far. I've given you this whole concept of blending in the facts. I've told you about the buyer's journey. We've talked a little bit about what you're trying to achieve with your hero's journey. And then I just kind of want to combine these two pieces together, okay? So in the beginning, Luke is kind of thinking to himself, is there a problem? Am I happy being a farmer? Can I sit here all day? So this is that awareness stage. Doesn't know that he has a problem. Then he's like, I'm a little restless. Maybe I should leave. Do I really want to leave? Can I get over this? So he's hitting this questioning in his head. Do I want to solve this? Okay. Then as we move forward, he's trying to figure out what are some of the solutions to solve this problem. He's going to go backwards a little bit. Does this problem really matter? That sounds like a lot of work. And then, of course, you come over to the other side. Who can help me solve that problem? Which is, of course, where you guys are coming in and shooting in as the expert, the person that's helped in the situation. And then you can help me solve this better than anybody else. So we've worked them in that top left corner is really just helping them identify that maybe they have a problem. This is very important on a podcast because you're going to have a whole wide range of audience. Then, of course, they're in the consideration stage towards the bottom here. And then as you get them to this past all the hard parts and they're starting to come out of it, this is where you can actually quickly move people into that decision phase, is giving you that opportunity to just showcase yourself. So who can help me solve it? Oh, wow. You know what, Kevin, you sound fantastic. I really think that you'll be the person that can help me solve this problem. So this is where you're trying to really make yourself the expert in this story. And then, of course, at the end, people will turn around and say, wow, this is great. I want to be here. And of course, you're hoping to get repeat business. That's the whole end game here. You want referrals. You want all of those things. And so this should inspire the feeling that people say, I want others to know the solution as well. And so they're now leading the hero's journey and telling their story to their friends, to their colleagues, whatever it is, in order to tell your story for you. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions how those two pieces come together?
Is this the time to start asking questions?
You can ask questions so far. I don't want to.
Yeah. So going down on the right-hand side, as I look at it, you get to that death and rebirth stage right there at the very bottom. And I feel like it's kind of funny because as you were talking, I was thinking about where I am right now in some of the stuff I'm doing in my business. And like it's with some of the stuff I'm like, oh, wow, I'm in the trials and failure stage. I'm growing new skills. I'm doing this personally in my own business. I'm not actually out there selling that to somebody. But I'm also like looking at this wall going, am I going to get to this wall and die? And I'm serious. Like there's like a bunch of really challenging things in front of me. And it is at that point, like if I were to flip the script and instead of me actually personally experiencing this, if I had found somebody or could explain this entire journey where they got to the end and they're wondering if they're going to die, is it right there where it's the death and rebirth? Is that where you are you interject your solution to the problem, because then they get to be reborn. They realized that they were stupid to consider doing all this stuff themselves, and that they should outsource all of their problems. And that's where I am.
Yeah, exactly. So, and let me clarify a little bit, because I'm not sure if there's people on that are like, but I do a product and does this apply to the same thing? It does. So it's either a person or a solution that's outside of them. So this could be as simple as, like, here's the great example. I just told you we just bought a new sales enablement tool. So this is going to save me like 10 hours probably a week in the work that I have to do as a director for my team. And so the solution, the hero is not my sales loft guy that sold me the product. The solution is the tool itself. It's that product itself. You want people to kind of identify with this death and rebirth, and it's really, this is the most uncomfortable part of your story. This is where you're going to inspire vulnerability, because you're either talking about that client that hit that bottom piece, or you're talking about yourself. And this is where it's very difficult as somebody that's a speaker to do this. I've been in this situation before. I actually had to get up and speak in front of this huge, massive business brokerage at their conference one year. And I was like, man, there's like, everybody in this room is looking at me like I shouldn't be up here. Am I an expert on this topic? Does anybody even care? Do they want to hear about my trials and tribulations as a business owner and why my exit, has given me regret? But I took a chance on it. And honestly, the response that you're going to get from it is going to be fantastic. You might be at this death and rebirth, but I encourage you to break it down maybe a little bit for yourself. You're going to go through lots of death and rebirth. This story goes round and round many, many times. And so if you can actually try to think of even something small that you've actually overcome in your business, I don't know enough about your business to say what that might be, but even it's like getting that first client, or, the first time that you ran into a situation, which as a previous business owner, where I was like, oh, cash flow not looking so good right now, and what am I going to do to get out of this? Those are small wins. Those are small hero's journeys.
I think what I was getting at, Laura, was that, like, I think this is resonating with me because I'm at the death and rebirth stage with some of the stuff that's in my business right now. And I feel like, oh, well, maybe I need a hero to come in, or maybe I need a product or a service to come in and pick that piece up for me. So it's resonating with me from that point of view. But I think that what I'm really saying is that everybody views themselves as being on this journey in some way. Like,
correct.
Yeah, and if you can find where somebody is on their journey path, and they're in sync with whatever product or service you're offering, and you can retell them the story of their journey, they'll automatically assume that you know the answer, because you can describe their pain so well.
Exactly. And this is the power. This is really what you're going to be trying to do every single time that you guys go out and you speak, every single time that you guys go out and write. You want to build in those little tiny stories, even miniature ones, because as you said, you're starting to identify what it is that you're talking about. You might be really curious, or you're like, well, what is the solution on the other side? You can talk about Rick all day on it, but that's not the point of this whole thing. But this is really what I love to speak about, because I was a business owner, and for your reference, I really feel like I burnt out. I exited my business and I hated the decision that I made. It didn't leave me with the good feelings, and I had a lot of issues kind of coming out of that. So looking back for me, I wish I had found that hero, right? I wish I had been more open to those things, and having somebody come in like Rick, for instance, that could have helped me get through the very simple things, like these huge owner dependency issues that I was having, working my 100 hours straight and 3 a.m. doing my own accounting and trying to handle it all myself.
But Laura, you've been reborn, and now you're on Rick's call.
And this is the truth of it, right? So I got to go through this experience, and that experience is what actually led me to work for the Value Builder system. Now I get to help advisors every single day, and they're impacting so many business owners' lives. So for me, that is my rebirth right there. And I couldn't have been there, and I couldn't have been as effective if I didn't go through that experience.
Hey, Laura, let's take this a different direction for a second, because I'm just curious. What comes to my mind as I'm listening to Jeff talk about it and you're talking about it, the other thing about this, I think if you spend the time going through this, whether it's a service or it's a product, is really understanding that ideal client, right? And so much of our time, I think early on in business is spent doing, we'll talk to anybody. And that's part of that whole time issue, right? And getting ourselves spread thin, but understanding, I love, when we talk about mission, right? What is the problem? I think this is great from a standpoint of a business owner, in that one of the biggest reasons businesses fail, and it's something I've been looking at recently in doing some research for projects that I'm working on. The number one reason given that businesses fail in the first few years is simply the problem they have is not big enough that there's a market for it, right? So you can have the best solution in the world, and if the market's not there. And so, maybe your thoughts on that. I just look at that and I'm like, this really works two ways. It gets you super focused on what that ideal client is based on what those needs are and what your solution sets are and how you tell that hero's journey. But it also, if you really step back, helps you avoid going after the market that really isn't your market.
That's correct.
Right? Would you agree?
Yeah, and so that gives us a segue to that next slide on your strategy, I think. And again, the first thing, it's like Rick planned that. He has not seen my slide deck. So the first thing, of course, is who's your audience, right? So I think I agree with you completely, Rick. Like, you start off and your first reaction is like, okay, let's just hit everybody. It's not an efficient use of your time. And often this is why your message fails. You just hit the wrong person with the wrong message. They're not in your target market. So when you're working through your strategy of your story, you really want to get very minute about who your audience is and where they might be in their stage, right? So again, if I was talking about, let's go back to the example of a podcast, I would want to be really clear about who is actually going to be on that podcast and try to get as much information if you're going to be, again, if you're going to be hosted, if you're doing it yourself, taking a look at some of the websites, if you're putting your message out there. A great example is if you're going to share, you can share widely on your LinkedIn, but if you don't have LinkedIn connections that have anything to do with the service that you have, and maybe they're, connections from your corporate or your family and your friends, it's not going to get anywhere. So if you were to go out and try to figure out who your audience is, you'd want to invite people to your podcast. I'm sure you guys already talked about this, that are part of an entrepreneur group, right? You're going to an entrepreneur group, that they're business owners. There's a great example. But your message itself, your story that you're starting to build straight from your marketing message of trying to get people to listen would be, are you a business owner? Ask the question, right? I talk to a lot of business owners, and here's what I often hear. You're putting it in there so that they go, I'm not their audience. I'm not the target market. I'm out of here. So you want to be really strategic to make sure that you know who your audience is so you can weave that into the tail. Okay. You want to think about what it is that you want them to do, like very specifically. Thing that it took me a while to learn, and it's so easy to fall away from this, is like, there's only one call to action. You can't have two. You can't say, hey, if you feel like, having a conversation, feel free to reach out, or you can go to my website, you can do here. They won't do anything, right? So very specific, because you're going to build your story about what it is that you're trying to get them to. You're probably going to want to stop and think about a little bit, what are the concerns that they're going to be thinking about? What action do you actually want them to take? Like the specific thing. I want you to go to my website and click the Meet Me button, okay? And then what message is going to get them to take that action? So those are actually the pieces that you're going to have to go through. Anybody, you don't feel the need to write this down, it's actually all on this little cheat sheet with some tips behind it as to talking about the audience and all of that. So this is part of that worksheet. And then you're going to want to think through your actual plan to your strategic hero's journey story. I want you to keep in mind that if you were going to be doing like a one-on-one session with someone, you probably would be about 2 to 4 minutes on your hero's journey. 5 to 6 minutes max if you're going to be talking to a larger group. You don't want the whole thing to be just about your story. You just want to weave the story in. Sometimes you might need to do multiple. It gets a little bit more confusing. The first thing that you're going to want to do is actually ask for permission to share your story, whether somebody can respond to you at all. So, if I was to be doing this and I was actually trying to work directly with you guys, I probably would have come in at the beginning and said, Rick, do you mind if I just give a little bit more information about my story? And Rick's probably going to be like, yeah, of course, Laura, go ahead. So even if nobody's going to answer, I was like, do you guys mind if I just tell you a little bit more about myself before we get started today? There's asking for the permission, right? you're going to position yourself. So again, I did that a little bit right at the beginning. Told you, I'm a director of sales and business development. I used to own my own business. So you're going to try to position yourself as to why should you maybe listen to me probably to do this. You're going to talk a little bit through what that old situation was. So where you used to be. Then you need to get to that catalyst, right? So what was the thing that happened, the exact situation that caused you to change? What were those challenges and obstacles as part of that change? And then you need to hit them with that turning point, okay? Now, to be clear, if you're not at that turning point yourself, that's okay. You only need to tell one version of the story, guys, okay? And then you're gonna tell them what the new situation was. And then what did you learn from the experience? You always wanna end with like, this is why you should care about the story that I told you, right? I'm so glad that I learned this because it saved me the $300,000. I'm so glad that I learned this because I owned a business with my dad, and this was the thing that actually helped me get over our turmoils of being business owners together. You really want to end it with what's the lesson from it. Okay. If you guys are following along the strategic hero's journey story, one thing you might notice really similar. Has anybody here read The Challenger Sale? If you have not, that's a fantastic book. The Challenger Sale works on this concept of driving people through different emotions, and your hero's journey story can do the same. So again, a lot of times you're like bringing them into the depths of despair and then bringing them back up. The hero's journey and the Challenger Sale approach do really similar. So if you guys have been reading that or have followed along on it, you'll find there's some overlap between that. I don't know if Rick has read it as well.
Hey, Laura, I have not read it. I just wrote it down, but I want to remind the audience, I do have the documents here, kind of a PDF that Laura's put together, a worksheet, if you will. So it's great. We know scientifically when you put your pen and paper to work, it helps with the brain, but we will have all this, so don't feel like you got to get everything right now. We'll kind of, at the end of the show, let you know how to get that information. So sorry, Laura, just wanted to.
No, for sure. That's exactly kind of where I want to take us. I thought that I'd break it down a little bit here. I've given you guys a lot of steps. So I thought I'd stop and ask, what questions do you have? Maybe you guys can share a little bit even with the group of, I actually could see a scenario that I might use this in. If you want any kind of feedback or ask any kind of clarifying questions about this strategic hero's journey. Now I've shut everybody down. They're like, oh my God, so much information. Awesome.
So Laura, I'll use there's a few wealth management folks on this call, and with my background in that role, what's fascinating to me is years ago, we all came around wealth management, or at least maybe I was the only one, but a lot of times, it was performance and it was different things. And the reality is, if you step back and you look at this, what I know today is our business on the wealth management side. It is about the journey, and it is about the specific challenges. It has nothing to do with what the media puts out there or the marketing puts out there in the world that confuses the clientele, but it's getting them to understand we understand the challenges, understanding their challenges and how we work through that and that kind of thing. And so when I look at Rich and Jay and John Kazanjian, and Chris or Kevin, what I know is, these are great tools. I'm curious, Andy, Tony, Jim, Dustin, any of you guys, you see maybe how this can help as you're working with clients or trying to get your messaging out there. Okay. All right, well, I guess that's good. We got some thumbs up.
The hero's journey was what launched me in my business today.
Wow.
The discovery of my purpose in life to help people reach their full potential. And I tell that story every time I speak. And I've been telling the same story for 30 years. It really hasn't changed.
I love that.
And the cool thing about it is sharing that story with people is what helps them discover their purpose in life and sets them off on their transformational power purpose journey. And the guy down at the bottom of the screen there, Tony Miner, is probably the poster boy for sharing that story.
I love that.
And it launched him into his business today. So don't ever underestimate the power of that story. There's a reason why Jesus told parables, because everybody's sitting out there listening to him when he's talking about farming or fishing or, you know, the vineyard. They sat there and put themselves and said, yeah, I've gone through that. That's where I am today. I've experienced that. So everything that you're sharing here, I think the thing that I would say is if you took the dollars out of it and you simply ask people the question of what is your purpose in life, if you can answer that, then all the other stuff just kind of starts falling into place naturally. Would you agree with that, Tony?
That's good. That's good. Thanks for sharing, Jim.
That's absolutely fantastic. I love hearing that other people use the hero's journey story because it is such a powerful tool. I thought maybe I'd just take like a few minutes just to give some tips and kind of bring back, we talked a little bit about how the story itself works people through every stage of the buyer's journey. So whether they're at the awareness, consideration, or decision phase, they should appeal to the story that you're kind of sharing with them. But I did share that whole brain theory. And so some of the tweaks that we can actually make on our stories is to throw in a little bit of everything. So, you know, you could be a little bit more powerful with your hero's journey story when I get to say things like, you know, I've certified over 1,000 certified value builders. I've got to work and be part of helping 55,000 business owners. Throwing in those little tiny pieces of data really can start to appeal to the person that's very data oriented. Because sometimes when you have people that think that way, they hear this really great story, and while there's a little bit of emotional appeal, they kind of sit back and they're like, is it going to help? Like, I'm a little skeptical. I need a little bit more proof. And so that can be one tweak as you guys start to write these out, is like, what's one little data point that I could throw in there? You know, that's exactly what the toothpaste companies do, right? Like 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this toothpaste. It's just tiny little pieces of data that go in to help with that logic piece. It helps kind of build that credibility for you as well. You know, if you say something, let's say you guys work with a lot of clients, you know, you say, I've helped over 100 clients with this exact issue. And every single time, it really comes back to the first client that I worked with. He told me, and then you can start telling the story, right? Because you've positioned yourself right up front as this credible person, which is kind of that step 2, but you're also adding in a little bit of a data layer. So that would be kind of a challenge that I would give you guys as you work through spelling this story. This is the end of the actual slideshow. So I do have time if people have questions. If anybody would want like an example of how you would work through this, you know, you can kind of throw it out and we can work on the fly here.
So my question, and we'll send this back out, and it's to the group, Laura, to kind of see if we can get folks here to open up the mics a little bit. But what I'd like to know is, you know, as you go through this, noise is what I think about a lot of time. One of the things that I've really been thinking about lately is people's attention, right? Because I got to be honest with you, I'm tired of social media. My inbox is.
There's somebody calling that was found on social media, guys.
Yeah.
Who has a phone that rings like that anymore?
Right?
Well,
the rotary phone.
I'm old enough that I can appreciate that. But whether it's email, social media, text messages, even phone calls, we had a conversation about this. I mean, the other day with my partner, we were talking about it. There are moments where, you know, I don't know what it is, but we're not at a place to engage all the time. And so as business owners, what I'm trying to figure out is, well, how do we then connect, right? Because if these things are becoming less effective from connection standpoint, and so this story and being able to go through it and think about your business and what it is you do and the mission, whether it's your sales force, the culture of your organization, or just being able to get people to understand what it is we do. I think this is important. So with that, I'm just curious, A, do you agree? And B, what is the biggest takeaway in listening to, what Laura shared this morning for you guys? So I just open it up and love to know what you think.
I think the biggest thing really is just understanding your audience. You won't be able to take anybody or communicate at all about any story if you don't understand what journey they're on. So, that means going down deep into whatever niche is like the perfect niche for whatever your product or service is, and truly understanding them and where they're coming from, and then putting it down to paper, which is a challenge. When your to-do list is 20 items long, putting that item under under there somewhere. So if anybody wants to write my hero story for me, please.
I promise the worksheet is super easy to walk through.
If anybody wants to read the worksheet for me.
I'll read it to you, Jeff, but it'll cost you. Hey, here's my question, Laura, Jeff, anybody. So it's a good point that Jeff makes. It's important to understand our audience, right? Our ideal client. So my question, Laura, maybe you've got some insight on this. What questions should we be asking this audience to know what the audience is to match the story that we need to tell?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic point. So let's walk through some of the different scenarios. First off, I'm going to throw out there that there's going to be times where you do not know your audience at all. Let's go for an example. You are doing a wider marketing campaign just to try to see what falls. So my caution that I'm going to give is when you don't know your audience, stay very general. You know that they're like business owners and maybe they might be interested in a service-based solution to help their business, but you don't know much more than that. You don't know industry, you don't know nothing. Stay very generalized in how you would approach that. So that would be kind of my tip one. But if we walk through some scenarios, if I was to be talking one-on-one with somebody and I really want to tell a great hero story, I'm probably going to start off asking some questions about their business. So in the case of advisory, I might even just start off and say like, if you could change one thing in 2021, what would it be about your business? One thing. And then when I hear that, they'll open up and naturally kind of say, you know what, like, honestly, I haven't had a vacation this year and I'm absolutely exhausted. So if I could change one thing, I'd like to be able to do by the end of next year, take a 3-week vacation and know that my business is going to run. And so now I can kind of tell a story about and connect that to when I was a business owner and I was working 90 hours a week and I never took a vacation and I was completely burnt out. Here's how I solved it. So it gets very minute. So you get that privilege of your one-on-one. Often what I always talk about a little bit, obviously, as you guys know, I think my team's pretty darn good at business development. We got Rick. So, but one of the things I talk about is a little bit of buzzwords. So if you can only get a little bit of information, kind of push into that. So sometimes, we'll see things like everybody in the audience has family-owned businesses. Okay, there's a great example. So if I'm talking to somebody that owns a family-owned business, I literally will go back to the story, true story, part of the hero's journey, about how I owned a business with my father. And, when things were not going so well, it really affected our relationship, which is why we brought in Rick. And Rick helped us really break apart that personal relationship, fix some of the issues that were going on in the business in relation to the fact that we didn't have a solid management team beyond us. And because of that, we actually are getting along better than we ever have. And I feel like I have that relationship back with my father. I'm going to try to tie in something like that. I'm going to tie in something that's going to appeal to the audience, because I can guarantee you every person that's owning a family business is having some sort of headbutting going on with their family members, period. I think anybody that's on here that works with family business would agree. And so if you can only get one thing, that can still be really powerful. So looking at websites, looking at the About Me section on LinkedIn, if you can find them on LinkedIn, that's been a really powerful one. But you're just going to look for little tiny words, buzzwords that are just going to help you be a little more specific. It doesn't have to be big. And so that was the example I thought I'd maybe share with you, Rick.
Very good, Laura. Anybody else want to share maybe a takeaway that they're getting from this?
Yeah, I'd like to, because it kind of helped me see the big picture. I haven't seen this kind of a format before as far as the story. And I kind of in that spot of challenges and getting new skills, and because I haven't gotten even halfway around the circle yet. So it's kind of helped me see that there is a way to get through that and kind of come out on the other side with a story that I'll be able to share and hopefully be able to connect with some people.
Absolutely. Good.
I absolutely love that. Thanks for sharing.
Anybody else?
I guess I can go. I'm pretty much at the very tippy top starting this hero's journey idea, just kind of figure out where I want to go and kind of reinvent things. So I really appreciate getting some of the information early on and how some good steps I might be able to kind of build this story and kind of like starting the whole strategy. So I really, really appreciate this. This is awesome.
Good.
I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, because that was one of the things is Laura has taken me through this before, like I said, and man, I remember the first time I saw this, my brain exploded, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I'm having to think about this a different way, right? And like Jim's been telling his story for 30 years, Jim. So you get a chance to refine that. But one thing I know is the better the person, whether it's an audience that I'm talking to or the person across from me, understands the story and we connect, usually the better opportunity to help them, with a message or a call to action or whatever it might be. So I appreciate that. Dustin, did you have something?
Oh, I just had a little something to say. This has been great, Laura. And Rick, thank you for the invitation. But I've been going on a journey, and my mindset has really changed over the past year. And I think if you can get yourself into think of yourself as being a good steward to others, as a leader first, and I think that will really help you come across to your clients, to your employees, because when you really do put them first, they can tell that when you're speaking to them, and it draws people in. I always tell people all the time that I do business with or work with, don't follow the money, follow the right idea, and do the right thing. Be a good steward to those that you're providing the service to, and to those employees that are helping provide those service to those clients, and the money will come. So I'm really trying to do kind of like a leadership, I wrote it down here, because a leadership reboot is kind of the thing that I was thinking of. And Laura, this is great, and I really did enjoy listening to you. So thank you.
Thank you for coming. I love hearing all you guys saying that you're at a different stage in your journey, and I know Rick can give you guys some great advice. But my big thing that I'm going to say to you is, like, you might think that you're at the very beginning, but there's somebody that's 2 steps behind. And so please don't underestimate the small wins that you guys have had, the things that you've overcome at the beginning. Like, those are gold to somebody else starting out. I always get really blown away when people ask me about my experience owning a business and exiting that business. And I'm able to share even just the small things, like this stupid postcard story has actually changed people's marketing. So, again, please, like, always have faith in the stuff that you guys are doing, and it really does matter. And that's my last thought. I'll throw it back to you here, Rick.
No, it's great. Now, Laura, we really appreciate you taking the time to be on with us today and sharing this information. Guys, so here, for those of you that don't know, we are recording this, and so if you want to listen to the replay and go through it again, we will put that out to everybody. If you would like a copy of the information that Laura put together, it's a nice little Word document. You can work through these things. Email me at rick@epicsbiz.com. Let me know that you'd like a copy, and I'll get that out to you, and we'll go from there. And, like Laura said, for those of you that don't know, we do mastermind groups, we do one-on-one work, we have the Value Builder score and some other things that we do. If there's any questions, let me know in the email, anything that you'd like to know. And I'd go this far, I'd be interested, because as I work through this, so if Jeff wants to, for example, work through his workbook, if anybody's interested in maybe jumping on a second call to kind of go through how they created it, and just kind of role play and share, I'd be open to that. This is actually my last Freedom Series call for the year. Just too many things on my plate, but we will have more. We'll continue, and I'll continue to communicate with you guys. So let me know what you'd like to see on future Freedom Series calls, and I'll work to make sure we get some of that put together. So before I let you go, any questions or thoughts before we let you wrap?
I was going to say thank you, Laura. I mean, we're pretty good here with our story. I wouldn't say it's as organized, or we're definitely going to improve it because of what I've heard today. But we're actually starting a new journey in our business. We're pretty good at the inorganic growth or organic growth. I'm sorry. Now we're moving into an organic growth stage, and you've given us a pretty good roadmap for that. And so I appreciate that very much. So thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for listening to me.
All right, guys, stay safe. Have a great weekend, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on the call.